question. The member from Kenora-Rainy River.
Thank you, Speaker.
New question. The member from Kenora-Rainy River.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Premier. The Nickel Lake Lumber Sawmill employs 25 people near Fort Frances. It has seen its hydro bills jump 50% in the last few years. Mr. Kendall Lundy, the owner, tells me he has just about had it and that everyone's jobs are in jeopardy. His competitors in Minnesota have hydro bills that are half of what he pays. What's worse is that he is subsidizing cheap hydro exports to these competitors, costing ratepayers like Mr. Lundy billions of dollars each year. Why does the Premier's hydro plan have no solution at all to rein in these wasteful hydro exports and reduce overall hydro costs?
Minister of Energy.
Minister of Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Of course, I'm pleased to rise and talk about the importance of our forestry sector and, of course, the importance of energy is to our forestry sector. And I know the Minister of Natural Resources and Forestry will want to comment as well, Mr. Speaker. But for us in Northern Ontario, we recognize that our large industry play a very important role not only in our northern economy, but in the economy of Ontario and of Canada, Mr. Speaker. And that's why, thanks to this government, Mr. Speaker, for Northern Ontario, we brought forward the NIR program, Mr. Speaker, the Northern Industrial Electricity Rebate Program, Mr. Speaker, which is helping every forestry company within Northern Ontario, within all of Northern Ontario, Mr. Speaker, and that's why we're so pleased to see that our forestry companies and their energy costs, Mr. Speaker, are one of the lowest, not only in Ontario, Mr. Speaker, not only in Canada, Mr. Speaker, but in all of North America, Mr. Speaker.
No, start the clock, sorry. The member from Timmins James Bay will come to order, and he's about that far away from having to withdraw. And he knows I'm not happy. Carry on.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know the company in Thunder Bay, Resolute, they're talking about how their energy costs, Mr. Speaker, are some of the lowest in their entire fleet in North America, Mr. Speaker. We're going to continue to work with our forestry sector, with our mining sector, to ensure that they remain as competitive as possible with the lowest possible prices. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Speaker, here's the thing. The Premier's hydro plan does next to nothing to help medium-sized businesses like Nickel Lake Lumber. The sawmill is too big to receive the 8% hydro rebate, and as far as we can tell, it also won't receive the 17% in bill reductions that the Premier has promised for small businesses. But it is not big enough to have the capacity to participate in the expanded Industrial Conservation Initiative. The NDP's plan would reduce hydro bills for all ratepayers, including medium-sized businesses like the Nickel Lake Lumber Sawmill. Why does the Premier's plan exclude medium-sized businesses from the 25% in savings she has promised?
I encourage the third party to read our plan because medium-sized businesses will qualify under our new expansion of the ICI program, Mr. Speaker. You know what, Mr. Speaker? We lowered the threshold to 500 kilowatts, Mr. Speaker. So you know what? We would encourage them to look at the plan. But when talking about forestry sector, Mr. Speaker, I've got a letter here from Tembec, a very, very prominent forestry company, Mr. Speaker. Let me quote. Tembec is able to effectively manage our electricity system cost in Ontario through our participation in a variety of programs. And as a result, electricity costs at the Tembec newsprint operations are comparable to our operations in other jurisdictions and with other competitors, Mr. Speaker. We recognize the importance, Mr. Speaker, of the forestry sector, of the mining sector, of our resource sector, Mr. Speaker, and that's what we're doing, Mr. Speaker, is bringing rates like with programs like the NIR program that is helping all of our industry, Mr. Speaker.